So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining, and some of you on quite late notice. So really appreciate your time, your generosity, your insights so far. Many of you we've spoken to recently, and we're excited to continue to engage. So this is the first in a series of workshops, and we'll have a bit of an explanation of that in a bit. But before we dig into that, just wanted to do a brief introduction of Utopia. Some of you are very familiar with Utopia, others of you medium, and some of you light. So we figured we just kind of run through a little briefly. Seeing some familiar faces as well. Hi, Busan. And yeah, so we're building an urban innovation ecosystem for emerging cities across Asia, Africa, Latin America, and have been doing so for the last 6 years. And at the moment in Asia, we have our Kathmandu studio and recently wrapped up a program in Manila. And this year, we're hoping to branch out to and set up operations in Dhaka and Manila fully. And so, you know, basically, why is it that we focus on urban? I think you can see from the high level numbers here that these 2 billion people across emerging market cities by 2100, only in the top 100 cities, is a good reason. And some of these cities are already facing a lot of limitations and obstacles seen by rapid growth. So we're trying to really focus in on these cities and ensure that there's also a network across the cities for better collaboration, better cross-pollination, understanding, and also putting it at the forefront of the global agenda. So yeah, we believe cities are the arena to build the next era with the majority of the population. That's where big things will happen, new waves of change, new ways of doing, new ways of living will come. And also where some of the biggest challenges that we see and we are facing already for humanity. So climate change, inequality, well-being, sustainability. So yeah, so this is the platform we're building. Our City Labs are Asia's platform for urban entrepreneurs, and really trying to improve entrepreneurs who are really trying to improve the quality of life in cities in the majority world, as we're calling emerging cities. And pretty soon they will just be cities. So we're doing this by co-building alongside the urban startups by pulling together founders, urban solutions, and capital. And that's, you know, a slightly new way to build urban startups, and we're really focusing on going from very early stage of the problem and idea all the way to prototype, all the way to scaling. And this, you know, where we really focus on is obviously we're urban, and then we really want to catalyze emerging technology to tackle some of these really thorny challenges, and the ability of these ideas to really impact 1 million people. Or 1 million revenue. So these are some of the key areas that we really feel like, you know, deserve improvement in terms of improvement in quality of life in urban areas. But we also acknowledge that there are many other areas that we might not see, and there's also many intersections, as we've spoken to many of you recently, that there's so many intersections in many of these areas that don't always cleanly fall in one area. So we have the wildcards solution for area for that, but we are sector agnostic as long as it's improving the city for the many. We're really focused on bringing together a strong global network of people across the globe, across our cities, who are focused on improving the city. And this is one of the reasons why we really wanted to do this workshop, is to start to bring together people already within the cities we're speaking to start to know each other across the network. And even if it's just 3 cities, we still really believe that there's a lot of power in connecting people across these cities. Yeah, so we're in it for the long haul. We really look at the future. And 2100 seems a long time away, but we still have to envision what the city is that we want to see in that year, and how do we get there. And we really see that emerging technology has a lot of potential, and we see really people, the urban entrepreneurs and all of our collaborators, as central to that. So that's it from my side. All right, well, I will now hand over to Pravina to lead the session.
Thank you, Dory. So I am now going to introduce the session and introduce what we are going to do today. Really excited. And again, thank you all for joining. As Dory mentioned earlier, this workshop is the first in the series of the Inter and Intra-City workshops, the Asia series from Utopia that we aim to do. With the series, we aim to sort of activate collaboration channels and avenues between the three cities, Kathmandu, Dhaka, and Manila, and the different disciplines that we all represent here today for creating a future of our cities that is better than today. So with this first workshop, we have titled it Surface. We seek to surface the challenges that each of the cities are facing and create opportunities for a bit of intra and intercity discussions on the futures of our city as well. So the workflow for today would be, we have planned for 2 breakout room sessions. The first breakout room we are going to go shortly, a brief introduction to that. In the first breakout room session, we will all be joining participants from our own cities. So before this workshop, we had conducted an initial user research interviews. I guess many of you were a part of that interview as well. And after synthesizing those interviews, we have come up with initial problem statements or insights from each of the interviewees. So we will be presenting that in each of the breakout rooms. We will go through a brief discussion on each of the insights and problem statements. We will have opportunities to add to the problem statements, discuss it further with our colleagues and participants. And then we will get to opportunity to vote on the top challenges. So this is what's going to happen in the next breakout room session. We will shortly go, but before going that, I would like to mention that this event was made possible by the Royal Academy of Engineering. Thank you to them. I guess we are ready to move to our own breakout room sessions.
Okay, I'll just jump into it because we don't have so much time, but thank you so much, everyone. Really excited to see you all here together. Nothing more heartwarming than bringing together a bunch of people you really admire. So I'm just going to quickly jump into it now. Let's see, I've just... Okay. So as Praveen had mentioned, we did some initial interviews with many of you, and we found a few patterns, some things that we wish we had a little bit more time to dig into, but essentially we've whittled it down to 2 kind of initial problem statement areas. And I'm just going to quickly read through them and would love if, actually, I should probably share this with you. That would be helpful. So if you could join me on the Miro board, that would be great. Otherwise, feel free to just follow along on the shared screen here, whatever is easiest and works best for you. Yes, so one of the key areas that we heard all across the board was the issue of mobility and the availability and safety and reliability of public transport, especially. Yes, and particularly women who are affected by lack of safety in public transport. And so as I go along, it would be great if you go up to the left here, there's a bunch of little stickers, little dots. So feel free to agree, disagree, or undecided, somewhere neutral if you'd like, to each of these problem statements. It would be great to kind of see a little bit, crowdsource a little bit your kind of how you feel about some of these problem statements and whether we were on the mark or not. and then we'll have an opportunity to discuss a bit after. And then the other issue around mobility is that last mile transport is largely missing. So really, if you can get to one node to the next, that's fine, but not being able to get from that node to your final destination. And the city is not compact enough to promote walkability, meaning that there are many issues with the locations of services that should be accessible to residents. Okay, I see already a red dot there. Okay, makes for some fruitful discussion. And then the next area that we heard a lot about was just around land and space. So it's all a bit physical, this one. The other one's also physical. So the consensus is that Dhaka does have open spaces, but they're not accessible or public. And it's often encroached on for non-public interests, whether it's privatized or just kind of informally taken over. But there have been local mass occasional efforts that have successfully reclaimed outdoor spaces for social public use on occasion, but not as much for long-term use. The issue around institutional fragmentation is very clear, which results in a lack of planning and regulatory processes in monitoring land use and really enforcing it. And therefore, which is a little bit less related for directly space and services, space and land, but certainly the lack of services for the city comes in is also a side product of then the side byproduct or byproduct of institutional fragmentation. Okay, a lot of agreement here, great. So I just wanted to start with a bit of a kind of pulse check on these. If anyone wants to, feel free to interact in any, we want to make this as comfortable for people who interact in many different ways as possible. Feel free to speak up, feel free to write in the Zoom chat, feel free to write sticky notes if you're familiar. On the left-hand panel here, you can click on sticky note, or if you just double click anywhere on the board, a new sticky note will arise. And feel free to type anything you'd like that is in reaction to anecdotes, anything you'd like related to these problem statements. So before I jump into, actually, I'll also jump into the first kind of question that we're interested in understanding here, is what are some of the key forces behind some of these challenges? And feel free to speak about any of these or related areas, and what are the characteristics of those forces?
Dory, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
This will be. I don't want to lose time, but I haven't used Miro before, so
Sure.
people are. So can we? So do we need to sign up for it? Because.
Okay. You should be able to guest access. Are you able to?
Okay. Yeah, I've used the link. I've used the link, but it's asking for me to sign up, and I can take the sticky notes. I don't know whether it's working or not. Let me see. Can you see if I'm writing? Can you see this? I have just pasted a note.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Can you see it?
Yeah. This is you. Yeah. If you type something in it, then we can see if it's your notes or not.
Okay.
If you just type something, it should show up.
Yeah, I have.
In the meantime, everyone feel free to drop anything in the chat or.
That's fine. So I'll skip that because we have a shortage of time. Okay, thank you, Dory.
Sure. But if you'd like to share something, I'm happy to type it for you.
Yeah? Yes, I will. Okay.
Yeah.
So for the first thing, the mobility, and we have included women are particularly affected by safety on public transport, but I think we have to include children too, and so that's a large population.
Yeah, and I think also disabled persons are vulnerable as well.
Yes, that would be good conclusion.
Yeah. any ideas on kind of the driving forces? Like why is it that the mobility systems or the overall mobility system, and within those the different transport or accessibility systems are not open or safe for women, children, disabled, and maybe the broader population?
So
sure.
In my opinion, so people in Dhaka, there are like strata, and so different kind of people use different kind of transport, and so there is this. So everybody is trying to improve their own. So there are people who owns private cars. They're not bothered about the public transport system. I own a car. So there are people who can't afford a car. So they are not so they are not affected at all when a road is actually made. There are people who use rickshaws, and there are roads where rickshaws are not allowed. So there are this division of means of transport. So I'll stop here and let other.
I think our transport system is not inclusive. I mean, it doesn't include people, and also there we have gaps between the number of transports that we have and also the number of users. Mostly the public transports are overcrowded, and when these are overcrowded, there is no safe environment for women and children especially. And when we actually say among 50 seats, only 15 will be dedicated for women, there is also this like inequality taking place.
Yeah.
There is also no glamour using public transport system. Using a bus, it's not considered as a glamorous. It's not glamorous. So if I'm saying I'm having a plane journey to some place, traveling through by plane, that's a big thing. Comparing with if I'm traveling by a bus, it's a glamour. Yeah, I think Tori, you have. Thank you very much. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the whole idea of safety is kind of questioned for women and children, not just in public transport, but any public area to begin with. And from my own personal experience, I think that is something that women face on a daily basis of questioning how safe the transport is, or the day of the time is, or the environment you are in throughout the day. So I think the safety is a big question, not just in public transport, even walkability in urban cities is as such in Dhaka.
That's a very interesting topic, safety, because when we talk about safety, there is a perception of safetyness. And we actually did a study on 100 parents, and 30% of them thought that their neighborhood was not safe for the children. And we have found in the same neighborhood, some parents are feeling that it's safe enough, and some are not. This is very interesting because this perception of safetyness. How can we change that? Because there are places, maybe they're safe, but we are thinking that it's not. And because we are thinking that it's not safe, I'm not sending my children over there, or we are not going there. And it's becoming unsafe actually when people are not going there. So this is a vicious cycle I'm talking about.
Yeah. Anyone else? Any thoughts, Tanzil, Hyman?
On this or the next one?
Any, yeah. Feel free to jump around.
I mean, clearly I see, I don't know who else is disagreeing with the second point, but I mean, Dhaka is incredibly compact. I mean, when you say it's not compact enough, I mean, I don't know what's the benchmark, you know, especially also topographically, because it, you know, biking is quite difficult in Sydney, let's say, it's so hilly. I mean, in Dhaka, it's incredibly flat. I mean, it's almost like, Netherlands. I mean, topographically. So, and by compactness, if you are meaning like the morphology of the city and places that you can go within a 5-minute biking radius or 10-minute biking radius, it's incredibly rich. Now you can say that it's unsafe to bike, or there are other barriers to biking or walking. There are not enough infrastructure. Walking is seen as like the least glamorous way of moving. So even if you have to go 5 minutes away, if you can summon up your chauffeur and car, that's great. So of course there are issues about the social, desires of mobility. But in terms of the city as as an object, it's incredibly suited for ventures like city bikes. In New York you have the rent a bike, or you take the bike anywhere. Now in Bangladesh, the problem would be like the security of the bike themselves, but as a capacity for the city, I would disagree with this point, and I say it's incredibly rich in potential for developing these sort of solutions.
I just want to build on that, what Tanzil has said, and the idea that I think the majority of the city is walking, right? I think most studies would say that 70% people who live in the city are walkers.
Already
right?
walking.
And but it's the 30% or 20% that uses private cars that creates the majority of the traffic, right? In the city. And but the thing is that, and then there are these spaces, like for example, you'll see that people use the rail lines a lot to commute, to walk, or there are these alleys. But I think some people might think that those spaces are not my space to walk, right? And I think so there might be also an elitist class or privileged class that some places are more walkable than others, right? Or and I wonder whether this sense of othering, of that this space is mine and this space is yours, I don't know whether that also results in like who walk where.
I agree with the thing that it's the city physically, it's very compact, like Tanzil has said and Shakil has said. The thing is, it's compact, but we are not using the advantage of having these compact cities. So I'll give you an example. So there are people who travel at least 10 kilometers or even more than that to drop their children off in a good school. But there are schools within their neighborhood, but that school is not considered as a good school. So their children goes, have to travel at least 1 hour to reach their school. So we are not actually using this advantage of having this compact city. We are not doing it. So I live in an area, and my workplace is maybe 1.5 hours from my home. But I could very well live near to where I work, but then it will hamper. My children would have to travel, say, 2 hours to reach their school, because I consider that school is better for their future. So how do we? So I think it's compact. The resources are there, but maybe it's not equally distributed. I don't know. I'm not sure about that, but that's how I feel. So maybe the land uses are not equally distributed or not smartly placed or located.
I'll just add one thing to that, like what Zaki said. So you see that's why to address mobility on its own terms would be actually, you'd be missing the whole picture, like the larger picture, because mobility is always, it's like the yin and yang, right? So you have what are people moving towards, or where are they going? So this distribution of amenities and distribution of livelihoods. So solving the traffic problem, let's say maybe not in the traffic or the roads, it's the distribution or the management. Imagine someone redesigns the timing of offices and schools and what opens. So that can have a large impact on mobility without touching the streets or roads. So I think, this larger nexus of livelihoods, amenities, and mobility the question of why people are moving to a certain location is so crucial to address, you know, if you're looking to solve, let's say, mobility issues.
That's a great point.
And so whenever we are talking about mobility, I think these issues of gender issues also comes to our mind, because so I can almost walk everywhere, and if I can go to a shop, and so like I have everything within 10 to 15 minutes walking distance from my house. But I know the same, my wife won't be able to do that.
Yeah, was that, Muhammad, were you saying something? I don't know. Joya, Ishita, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I was just listening to all the points, very insightful. As we're talking about the why side of it, right? Why this public transport is not safe, or why it's inconvenient. And I think one other major factor that comes into play is right? The education of safety and standards of the drivers, let it be the bus drivers, rickshaw pullers, everyone, right? Even if you look at the statistics, most of the accidents that are happening here, the bus drivers, they don't even have the proper education about the traffic rules, safety, everything. So I'll give another example here, right? Why Patao, Uber got very popular here, because they directly worked with drivers. They trained them up, they gave them an app to work with. And it's always about, you know, giving them a lifestyle and showing them the picture of moving up to the ladder, right? And I think all of this kind of motivational factors comes into play when overall changing the landscape. So I think this is one of the huge area where we all need to work together to kind of educating the workforce.
Ishita, you're going to say something?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thanks. So I was just to add to everything all the participants have been speaking about. I think for me, the way I see it, if you really go down to the core of the problem, as some mentioned, no, it goes back to the core problem of, you know, transport problem is a land use problem. So if you're not addressing that at the planning stage, this will remain one fundamental problem in the way the mobility happens. The other would be, of course, the institutional aspects comes in, where your different systems comes and play in, how your bus operators are being managed, how your registration process, how you're controlling the vehicle, and different policies that are regulating. But I think one very fundamental part when we're talking about mobility is the people factor, which we often forget to talk about, because end of the day, it's people who is influencing the way we are, or it's supposed to influence and inform the way we plan and design these mobility systems. And in certain aspects, if you look at a city like Dhaka, where, you know, it's 18 million people, you cannot, it needs to be at the top of the problems that you're addressing and how people are using the spaces. And there's a disconnect between how people are seeing what is needed in terms of their services and how the city is sort of providing. So with that, what really is happening is we talk about people's behavior in the street, how that collectively we are moving about our cities. So there is an aspect of behavior change, but I think it also needs to sort of be complemented with responsiveness in the way we design and make policies for addressing people's needs. So just wanted to add that.
Can I jump in a little bit, Tori?
Yeah, sure. And then maybe we'll
okay.
move over to the next problem area, since we only have 10 minutes left. But yeah.
The last thing, I think that maybe Joya Chaudhary. So there are a lot of, when we're talking about mobility, there are a lot of informal things going on in Dhaka that we don't recognize, and some of us don't know about it. And I think so when Joya Chaudhary was saying about, you know, training a little bit about the safety issues. So what I'm saying, so there are a lot of informal and unrecognized means of transport in Dhaka that we do not know about. I'll just give you one or two examples very shortly. Like there is this, all of in Dhaka, they know about this Gulshan Lake or Bonani Lake. And there is informal, boat ride. So you can actually cross the lake with very, maybe 10 taka or 15 taka. And it actually changes season to season. And I know many of us, we don't know about that. So it's just, there are things, and we also talked about this thing, this 3-cycle van that they drop children in the schools. So that's another thing, which if we could just train them a little bit, structure them a little bit, things would be different. It's very, it's at very micro scale, but actually it's there. It's there. It just needs a little bit of recognition.
Right,
Thank you.
right. It's very nuanced, right? You have rightly pointed out, very much nuanced, very much informal, but yes, that micromanagement would be needed at the beginning.
Just a quick thing that Zaki said, like for example, there used to be from the boat, I could go from Police Plaza to Gulshan 1, right? But that was stopped. That was stopped, and I have a feeling sometimes the bus lobby also plays a part in encouraging or discouraging what will affect alternative to using buses. Like for example, I think trains were also thought of as a good way of commuting to work on time, but apparently the bus lobby fought not to let the train timing change. So that so I don't know with this boat issue as well, but I do agree that there are forces that also result in the traffic, right? Not like yeah.
On the
and
boat
I mean,
issue, I will add, I think, sorry.
Go ahead. No problem.
I was just going to add that on the boat issue, that I think the one point raised earlier, the perception of security matters. For some reason, this really informal part of the city, as Joy mentioned, is totally unrecognized by the way we plan and design cities. But largely, if you want to characterize Dhaka, I think it's the informalness that characterizes what's happening all around. So when you ignore this large group of people, you end up doing things which is only serving to a small group of people. So essentially, making the city not equitable and not inclusive.
I mean, Dory, I hope you see the pattern here, which is that talking to a large bunch of us who are kind of like upper middle class people, educated and all of that, you're getting like only a particular slice of Dhaka. Large part of Dhaka that we are saying that is unmapped, unrecognized, all of that. Innovation, a lot of innovation is happening there that we don't even know about unless we're there. So knowing that city, knowing actual Dhaka is like a precursor to really doing anything fruitful or en masse for the 90% or 70 to 80% people. It's not gonna come out of like, I'm playing the devil's advocate a bit. So.
No, it's perfect.
Yeah.
It's always really helpful.
Absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Because maybe Dory hasn't. So like in Dhaka, there is a link road from Bagda to Gulshan 1, and the width of the footpath is maybe only 4 feet, but there are like thousands of people travel that. But the width of the Gulshan Avenue is maybe 10 feet, but less people travel there. So there are these, equal, not equal distributions of. So we don't know the actual Dhaka. Like Tanzin said, the group that we are here, we don't actually use those means of transport when we're talking about mobility. We know because we walk a little bit. That's how we came to know about it. And our professions are dealing with built environment. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Super insightful.
Yes, because when we talk about I'm just gonna say it very quickly that,
of course, yeah.
Like we talked about that the glamour of taking cars and taking your chauffeur out, or even the walkability. I mean, most of the people, they are walking despite the quality of the roads we have and the pedestrian we have. The people who need to walk, they will walk because they have no other option, like the privileged ones like we do. So I do agree that even if it's not safe, some people are bound to go out because that is the only option they have. And sadly, those are the people who don't come into these discussions, and we try to reflect that. But how much do we really know, as others have said?
Am I audible, guys? I don't know. I don't think my audio works. I'm audible?
Yeah.
Oh no, fantastic.
I think magic. Yeah, it's working.
Yeah, and I think just what I wanted to share was, I think only my thing is that when you think of mobility, and it's just that the broader mobility scheme, one key aspect, the reason why it doesn't flourish is because of the insurance model. I think there are not enough insurance on the road available for anyone to take on any new ventures, right? Let it be public transport, let it be private transport. So that's something, and of course, Dhaka is not the first city that is designed which is very car focused. There are many cities across the world that is completely car focused. Let it be in developed countries, and of course the temperature, right? It's not all walkable temperature. I like to walk. I enjoy walking, but sometimes it's just hot, and you gotta sweat it out. So, so again,
you need to not be so precious.
Correct. Yeah. So even now, if you look at the mobility, if you look at certain associations coming in, so the new cars, there's a new automobile policy that's coming in place that will make new car ownership much more easier. The government's relying on taxation. So there are certain means, again, I think from the elitism, again, because of the tax brackets that it was built on, the way now the markets are being structured and the way the incomes are coming in and the availability of new cars at an affordable price range, I think it's all going to change to a point that where mobility means, I don't know, private mobility is going to change, but in the public mobility space, there's a lot of work to be done. So again, that's just my 2 cents on it. And I think there's a second one on the land issue. I'm sorry, I just had to walk off a bit.
That's great. Thank you.
I think the land issue is one of the most interesting issues here in Dhaka. I think that's incredible. It's a compact city with very limited land resources, and the land resources prices vary even a mile away, and it's close to multi-million-dollar deal. So it's very interesting and exciting, right? One thing I agree on is that the institutions are improving. Again, there are a lot of disputes on land in general and in spaces. So I think the land distribution, there are digitization in the government space where they're trying to digitize the land processing and everything. But there's a lot of work to be done in terms of getting the lands more sorted. Purchasing a land itself can be a hassle in any part of Bangladesh, let it be Dhaka. Dhaka is the most highest real estate prices in Bangladesh, and the land prices. And if you even go where majority of the people stay, the prices can vary very much. So yeah, back to the team.
Yeah. So I'm just interjecting here to say that we only have a couple more minutes. So unfortunately, I would love to have gone in so much deeper in both, but I think what I would love to do is actually, if each of you in either, if you can't access the Miro, feel free to type it into the Zoom chat. But if each of you would if you wanted to either rewrite or create a separate one or edit a problem statement that you feel like is really representative. I know from your point of view, or if you want to think about it maybe from a broader point of view, if you could do that in the last couple minutes, that would be great. You can do it in the Miro board. In the Miro board, there's below the 2 problem statements, there's one called 02 refine problem statements. What I can do is bring everyone to me. So this is, if you would like to, please feel free to write a problem statement here that you identify with. The intention is that we're starting to really craft this narrative. And of course, it's so complex, but the more we have kind of these individual perspectives, the more we can try to cross-reference, the more we can get a better understanding of that granularity and find entry points for, like you mentioned, Tenzo, to better understand the real situation on the ground. And so, yeah, is that okay with everyone? All good? If you want to develop your own problem statements, feel free to rewrite the one previously and edit it. You can also add new problems that maybe have surfaced that we've mentioned or that have triggered in your mind as the discussion has gone on, or maybe it's part of your life's work. Yeah. Yeah, so we'll be in 2 minutes, but. So I'll just talk over it, but feel free to ignore my my voice. But we were talking about you know, the not just the safety of one specific demographic of women, but really everyone, children, and not just only on transport, but across all spaces, and perhaps a bit of a lack of ability to even access those spaces because of that safety. Regulatory oversight. I see here this one that we didn't really mention here, but lack of regulatory oversight is key. Lack of mobility, justice activism, and progressive planning. And of course, we spoke about the informal sides of the city, whether there were those who were really left out of the conversation, these conversations as well. And yeah, we're hoping to create space for people to be able to contribute to these conversations from many walks of life, as well as sectors and disciplines. Yeah. Ooh, so many colorful sticky notes. Great. And feel free to dip into the land and space issue as well. I know we didn't really, we kind of delved into that a little bit in how it relates to mobility, but very open to hearing more ideas around this. Yeah.
And I'll just say something that
Sure.
I just probably need to clarify a bit. I mean, I think there is a misconception that, you know, Dhaka is already built. Number one, there is no more space in the city. That's, for me, when I actually map Dhaka, then I see, okay, no, that's not entirely true. Take a look at the you know, the green spaces, and then you'll see that a lot of these green spaces are within government-owned agency compounds. So for example, you go to, everyone here will know Science Lab More, and Science Lab More is a, you know, a very dense area built, you know, in the older part of the city, but there is like a huge government, government scientific institution sitting right in the middle of a commercial hub.
Okay, awesome. So on mobility, the first problem statement that we have is congestion on roads and very poor investments in public transport. The elevated rail system, once a pride, is now deteriorating. The recent lull in transport use brought on by COVID and lockdown was a missed opportunity to innovate. So that's a problem statement that we've identified from the various interviews that we had. And if you could share, if you simply agree with it, disagree with it, or, you know, if you just agree with parts of it, then feel free to just use the gray or undecided neutral option. I'll just give us about a minute to do so, and feel free to use the chat box or drag the stickers in the Miro board itself. I'm seeing a few agrees. Looks like mostly agrees. I'm also going to move to the second one, which is mobility challenges inhibit Manila from being an equitable city. The current infrastructure promotes movement of vehicles over people. Yes, please feel free to use the chat box as well. And, you know, if there are certain nuances that we missed, if you're like, I somewhat agree with this, then please feel free to let us know that as well. And we'll get further into the depth of this in just a little bit. This hopefully is just the beginning. Cool, maybe 30 more seconds before we move on to the next one.
the sake of, I might just move 3 extra dots for the people in the chat into the space.
Sure, that'd be awesome. Thank you, Sam. Okay, cool. So maybe then we can move to the next problem area, if that's okay. And we'll come back to this for more discussions in just a little bit here. Thanks, Sam. So the next problem area is focused on climate change. And the statement that we have is climate change is making Manila's communities more vulnerable, especially during the rainy season when many communities are submerged in water. Absence of flooding infrastructure adds to the high risk situation. So if you could share if you agree, disagree, or are neutral about this. Also, if there are certain things that we might have missed in the framing of this. Thank you, Oscar and Golda. I think I'll move a gray sticker and then a red sticker representing your answers. And I think in just a second, we'll also ask you to elaborate just a little bit further. Thank you. Great, excellent. Cool. Maybe just 10 to 15 more seconds to wrap up this one. Okay, I think almost everyone has voted. So seems like everyone agrees in the first one, and then there are certain nuances or certain details that we might have missed on the second one. If that's okay, I'm just going to redirect our attention again to the first one to begin with. You know, even though we agreed, we'd love to hear more your thoughts on this. And, you know, apologies if some of these questions ask you to repeat what you've already shared in the interview. So if you'd like to go deeper, please feel free to do so. You know, we're also in a group environment. So if you'd like to share the insights you've already shared, I think that would be helpful to spark the discussion up as well. So I do have a few questions to sort of help start the discussion. And the first is, so if these problem statements are true, and this problem statement is both true and urgent, what are some key forces behind the challenge and some of the characteristics of these key forces? How are people relating to or understanding the forces that have been driving this challenge, you think? And at this section, please feel free to just share your answers. Feel free to raise your hand, not even necessary. If you just like to share, start the discussion, please feel free to do so. Anyone would like to start?
I'd like to say something. This is Choi.
Great.
Basically, I like that by mobility, we mean like the movement of people, services, and even ideas. In the Philippines, well, in Manila, this is really a scourge because I live in Manila, right along Taft Avenue, and I have written a long essay on how we have sidewalks which are used not for pedestrian mobility, but parking and all sorts of things. It is a city that doesn't is not made for people, but made for cars. I mean, pedestrians. I mean, and so I think there is. I have been told that there is a history to this, that the rich don't really want their lots to have people hanging around and standing around. So they don't like, there's a Filipino term for it, standby, that you just stand and people just hanging around their areas. And for this, there is a subliminal message that people hanging out on or walking along sidewalks are not welcome. So there, I mean, this is just a start.
Great, thank you so much, Troy. Any thoughts on that?
Hi, this is Trixie. I'll just jump in and add to what Troy said. I agree. I think that a lot of it has to do with mindsets of people. And I think that you can probably trace this to several things, including maybe our colonial history as well, especially American architecture, for example. You know how cars are kind of central to American cities. And if you look at how Manila was built, there's a lot of sort of remnants of that kind of car centricity. And I think this is a mindset that we've also, I guess, that we were kind of stuck with, I think, for a really long time, in the sense that, you know, people in the Philippines, a lot of people in the Philippines looked at car ownership, for example, as sort of a milestone or a symbol of success, or sort of, how do you say it, like upward social mobility. But I think that in recent years, I am starting to see, and I don't know if this is like just my circles. I actually used to work at the Department of Transportation like a few years back during the last administration. And it was really there that I started seeing mindsets shift around this, in the sense that people are now a little bit more open to the idea that, you know, we have to focus on people being able to move rather than vehicles. And what I've been seeing in the last 6 years or so, I think there's been kind of a little bit more activism around those lines, and people are starting to open up their minds on it. Maybe the challenge now is kind of that kind of mindset also being adopted by people who can actually move things from top down, in terms of like policy making and pushing for, you know, what kinds of infrastructure projects get funded, things like that. Yeah, those are my just initial thoughts.
Great, thank you so much. And I think there's been a lot of mention on culture and mindsets. So I'm also wondering if there is a specific group or specific influential groups that are in the driver's seat, you think? So is there a who in the driver's seat basically for, you know, driving this problem forward?
Hello.
Hi, yes. Hi, we heard you earlier. I wasn't sure who it was.
I think it was Oscar. It was Oscar.
Yes, ma'am. So I just like to add with what Mr. C talked about. So as for me, I think it's a history, and I think it's just a poor planning on the part. First and foremost, the one who planned mainly for the Department of Transportation was the mindset was all about retirement. So if we go the start of the retirement age of those who were in I think in 1945 to 1950 after the war. So the retirement plan, I think, of the 60s and the 70s are to have a car and to have a house. So that's why we have houses. That's why sprawling houses we have. Then we were thinking that, oh, we'll have expanded streets just to have because everyone's gonna have a car. So it was just lately in the 80s and 90s, and I think with the studies from Harvard, that we really came to accept that, oh, because of that mindset, we have seen that the sprawling homes is not a proper retirement one. Then and having cars is not really a good one because it created induced demand. So going forward, and I think this is very good with the new generation, especially the generation of 90s and the 2000s, is that they came to realize that, oh, we don't really need cars, we don't really need. There's now a change. So if you could see, like in Manila, the design of the BGC, they're going back to the design of Metro Manila before, or the one in Escolta before. It has larger it has larger space for commuters, and then they are installing. They have this place where they could. They also add waiting shelters. So so that's it.
Thank you so much for sharing. Just for the sake of time, I'm just going to move us along to the next question, if that's okay. And we've discussed a lot of, we discussed the problem at length, including the drivers, including any possible influential groups, the mindset, the culture itself, and maybe other elements that reinforce this issue at hand. But we're also wondering if you could share more on who you think are the people that are most affected by this problem, and also who are spearheading any change or sort of solution building towards this problem in Manila.
Architect Paulo Alcazar.
I'd like to share a bit about that particular question.
Sure.
Yeah, in the Philippines, there are a lot of environmental planners, architects, and those who are actually like the designers who are involved. But nothing happens unless you tap into two important, and please correct me if I'm wrong, colleagues who are from Manila. You need politics and economics. So if we get more involved in this, perhaps we can make changes. I really think that there's been an upswing, especially with things like this. In fact, I know some of them. I know Raw, who's not here, but there are already people working towards it. But we work in silos, and unless we delve to interdisciplinary, cross-disciplinary practice, we're not going to achieve much. So, and it's not just society like this. I'm an educator, and I teach in schools, and it's very important also that we put this down to the level of the students, so that because it takes a long time. And I think if you say that who are affected by this problem, everyone is. And so I really feel that plans are being made, and there are a lot of solutions like this, but if you don't get our acts together, nothing's going to happen. Politics and economics, whatever that means. Okay.
Thank you, Joy.
Yeah.
And just to add that I think essentially Choi summed up why Alcazaran, for example, is so constantly quoted in this type of question, purely because he is one of the biggest people in the Philippines, as far as I've seen so far, who has solved that question of marrying politics, economics, and design, simply because of his influence and connections, etc. And not every environmental or urban planner in Manila or in the Philippines or in the Global South has that kind of access to those networks, is what the pattern that I'm seeing.
And he's quite savvy in online communications and social networks is quite. And then in the same webinar that Sam and I met, I had a talk, and there was Paul Alcazaren and another environmental planner who's Dinky Von Einsiedel. He's an old guy, and he has served the Ministry of Human Settlements at the time of Mrs. Marcos. And he said something that really took me, I was so impressed when he said that, why is it that Paulo has more projects than I do? It's because Paulo hits the problem on the head and gives solutions, and then he gets commissioned for that project. Mm-hmm. Instead, Dinky Boy Einsiedel is more the concept guy. He has these ideas, and which are very important. In the Philippines, in the curricula that cut across all, it's only now that we are realizing how important critical thinking is. Critical thinking is not very much in the curriculum, in the curricula across all courses until as of late. So people have to learn how to think now. How we've been so used to colonial history. We've been told what to do. We've been under such and such country, and so we are a very docile people. And so we have to start, speaking out and voicing out our concerns, and not be afraid to cross boundaries or step into other, there's a way of doing things, and we have to learn this still. We're quite an adolescent society, actually.
Great, amazing. There's just so much we can discuss, and I think with everything that you shared, there's just so many follow-up questions that I have, and hopefully eventually we'll be able to get to those. But unfortunately, for the sake of time, we're going to have to move on to the next problem area, if that's okay. So actually, before we do that, I'm just going to ask if, I see that all of us agreed on this framing, but is there a different way you would want to frame this question at all? Or a different way, this problem statement, or a different way you might want to structure it, any details you might want to add to the problem statements themselves. And if so, if I could request you to either sort of share it in the chat or add it to the Miro board.
I think one thing I would add is the fact that Metro Manila is a collection of cities where services are not uniformly spread out across the metro area. So it's the overly hyper centralization of services within the entire metro area. I think that is sort of the fundamental thing within urban planning and design, for example, when it comes to mobility. Now, I fully understand that this is not going to be solved by an urban innovation startup, let's say, but I think the fundamental sort of problem area that these two challenges are trying to address is the hyper-centralization that I described.
Great. Thanks so much. Anything else to add before we move to the next problem area? Okay, cool. So this one, we actually had a few mixed responses. So if I can request maybe Hulda to elaborate a little bit on your earlier insight towards this problem statements to begin with.
Yeah, I hope everyone can hear me because my internet is unstable.
Yep.
I have to more closely speak with the mic. Anyway, on the first statement, I do agree that climate change is a problem, but it's not the main problem of Metro Manila. It just exacerbates whatever development lock-in development model that we've followed, a model that we've followed all along. For one, the statement, especially during the rainy season, when communities are submerged in water, that alludes to flooding, and then by its very nature, a lot of Metro Manila cities are in sinks and swamplands. and it's really in flatlands, no, by geography, right? So and if we're gonna look back, climate change has nothing to do with it, because the culprits of flooding is poor water sewerage system, or garbage, just kind of swamp and water system. And on the uplands, or in the other communities, it's deforestation and forest degradation, and it has nothing to do with climate change. So if it is climate change in Metro Manila, I would kind of look at the thermal impact on labor and mobility, and on health. And if related to water, it would be on the quality of fresh water, because those are directly things that are already established by science. And I do remember this. There is a study on this. I can also send you the link for that. So I would like to nuance it. Climate change is a factor, but it's not the problem on flood.
Great, thank you so much, Golda. Any responses to this? Anyone that agrees,
Hello?
or would like to add? Hi, yes, Oscar.
Yes, I think yes, Ms. Golda is right. Climate change is not really the factor. I think one of the factors really is land use management. Because if you see the difference between the European mindset and the American mindset, the European mindset is more of like there's already an establishment here, or there's already a building here, then we'll just continue with this building and will not expand more. So actually, in green infrastructure, the main problem, or what I'm trying to say is that in green infrastructure, what I'm trying to say is that the expansion that the people made is the one that's causing the environment. So if we have a proper land management, that if we don't really expand more and more, then we won't be having a problem. And especially with the rainy season. So and if we put more green infrastructures like parks, where people would converge, more green areas, green spaces, I think that would be. And also on my comment on the flooding infrastructure, I do not agree with the flooding infrastructure, because the flooding infrastructure means that you already failed on the land, on the planning of the land. That's why just a band-aid solution to have a flooding infrastructure. But if you have a proper land management, you will not be needing a flooding infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you, Oscar. Joy, I think you were also about to share something.
Yeah, some things that I have just written down, that in addition to climate change, our problems environmental degradation as a result of hyperdensity. Because if you count Manila, there's 8 by 8 inches per person if we lay everyone down on the ground. Yep. And there's also more people means more solid wastes. And yeah, I mean, we know this. I mean, but it's especially felt in Manila. I just wanted to share that.
Great. Thank you, Joy. And Sam, I think you added some insights as well. Would you like to share that?
Yeah, I think Choi basically pointed out that there are things that we know, and what I'm saying is that there are things that we don't know. And the climate change factor in flooding is the thing that we don't know, and we're incredibly unprepared for. I gather we are also unprepared for the things that we do know, but at least those are known unknowns in a sense, and those are known interventions as well. Whereas the challenge with climate change, in particular with regards to greater and stormier seasons and sea level rise, for example, this is something that nobody is prepared for right now in Metro Manila and will wipe out most of the metro area. And if we are not concerned about those challenges today, then there's no more conversation really that needs to be had.
You know, I added earlier that I think there's also a leadership crisis. I'm so sorry to point that out, because how can you do cosmetic solutions to, I mean, putting sand, because I live right across Manila Bay, and now all of a sudden oh goodness, I mean where do you get this? And then Manila City says, it's not us, it's national, it's DNR who's in charge of that, but they're doing all this in Manila. So yeah, so I said frustration and inspirations. I'm not stopping because I found you guys, but I'm really so frustrated. There.
Great, thank you so much. Just recognizing that we have very limited time left, I'm just wondering if we can actually collectively reframe the problem statement we have, and it seems like we're missing quite a few details, or it could be framed differently. So maybe if someone could start sharing how they might frame the problem statement, the original problem statement, slightly differently to either include some of these nuances, or just, you know, recognize the fact that maybe climate change is only exacerbating some of these issues, but might not be the direct culprit.
Kavya?
Yes, hi.
Yeah, so I guess it's better to just say climate change is exacerbating flawed development policies that were that are already in place. And this relates to different impacts, including supply chains and food supply, urban services and logistics. And much of the problems that are identified also carry within them the opposite, which is the solution as well. To upgrade everything does not require climate change, but you also address climate as well.
Great.
I agree.
Great, thank you. Just seeing that we have 30 seconds left together. So for these final 30 seconds, we'll actually be going back to the plenary. Thank you all so much for your insights. I know we could have dive deeper, so much deeper, and there's so much left to discuss, and hopefully eventually with all of these engagements we will be able to do that. But in these last 10 seconds, I wonder if we can have someone volunteer to share some of these insights in the plenary. Hi, Chelsea.
Hi.
So I think it might just be us two in this breakout room. So maybe we can proceed with discussing, if that's okay.
Sure.
So I'm just resharing the question again in the chat, and feel free to take a few minutes to think about it. I definitely need a few minutes, I think, but create a preferred future picture for your city in the year 2050. So what do you hear? What do you see, and how does it feel?
What is the first question again?
So what is your preferred future for Manila for the year 2050? And, you know, just to help sort of guide that, like, what would you hear in that preferred future? What would you see? How would it feel?
Okay. My preferred future for Manila for such year is that I would want every woman to feel respected in all their areas. I want them to feel comfortable roaming around, walking around Manila. I also want them to be given equal opportunity and rights. And also, I would want Manila to have a changed system, because as of now, all our system have been damaged because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Our government is not that good when it comes to the implementation of rights and equal opportunities for for the Filipinos since this time of pandemic. So I want changed system in every government policies like that. And also I would want to make a change when it comes to the LGBT community, since we all know for a fact that LGBT is not respected here. It's just merely tolerating. So I think that would be a great change for Manila.
Great, thank you. And do you want to share a little bit more in terms of what you would see in that, in that preferred Manila, or how it would personally feel?
I want every Filipinos to feel comfortable, and not just life comfortable, but every aspect in their life must be comfortable, and that would comfortability of every Filipinos will be brought by having some change in policies. And when it comes to economic, because we are one of the poor country in Asia, so I would want economic factors to be changed for the comfortability of every Filipino.
Great, thank you so much. Hi, Aman. I think you've also just joined us. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, I'm wondering if you could also share your preferred future, if that's okay.
Sure. So, living in Kathmandu, my thoughts or what I've seen Kathmandu as is more of a concrete jungle, which is kind of expanding every other day. So, for me, the future Kathmandu, I would like to see is maybe a Kathmandu with more open spaces to breathe in, like for such as places like parks, or even multifunctional spaces like the Darbar squares, where that particular space is being used by different sort of people for different purposes. Like in the morning, there are a lot of people or more people more focused on the religious purposes, going on in around for the temples and all. During the days, it's more of a passerby's destination where you can have a seat and take a break. And in the evenings, it's more of a chat or gossip place for young people. So I'd like Kathmandu to be maybe have or save the open spaces that are still there for the future. So that's what I envision Kathmandu in 2020 should be.
Great, thanks so much for sharing. I think we might slowly be running out of time. Anything else anyone else wants to add? Chelsea, any response to that?
Hello.
Hi. Yes.
Yes. I think I might have to add something. When it comes to the Philippines setup, it's the local government unit uh, who make changes in our system. And for the past few months during the pandemic, it's the local government unit who planned everything. And I think the system in the local government unit shall be adopted by the national government. I know it's the opposite side, but local government units are doing its best in handling this pandemic. So that's all.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Core urban center for all urban in Nepal as a country, but in Kathmandu Valley, it's a little bit different issues. I mean, you have the core commercial center, you have administrative center, and of course, there's a high level of concentration of economic activities within that center. But at the same time, you have a fragmentation in terms of the urban expansion. that is happening rapidly with 6% growth rates. I mean, you have obviously land use plan that is also compartmentalized and so on. So it's that's why I just feel that the word centralization maybe doesn't really capture well the dynamics of the city overall.
Sure.
So maybe it's a question of how to sort of, for instance, the environmental impact is not so much centralization. The environmental impact, let's say, for instance, I'm in Kanta, close to the park, and obviously by the month I can see the expansion into the mountains and into the park, or at least the buffer zone, so called. So I'm not sure centralization is a driver for that. So that's why I'm saying that maybe, you know, it's other dynamics. It's basically, of course, I think fragmentation is one of the important things, that there's no centralized and strong authority to oversee, let's say, land use as such. So it's a little bit different dynamic and problem. But, yeah, that's just my thinking at least.
I do see green stickers here as well, people agreeing. So any comments on people who agree with centralization then?
Yeah, Niranjan, maybe you can explain what does it mean then? Because centralization in most of the, let's say, political science terms means that a country is centralized around one city. But when we talk about the city as a whole, you know, we're looking at how does the different parts of the city within the valley connect with each other. And obviously, I think we can all agree that Bhaktapur is a center of its own, has its own industrial activities. Kathmandu has its administrative center.
Well, this word
so on, right? So it's not very so much clear, the word. But anyway, it doesn't matter. Let's continue.
Thank you. I think Niranjan was saying something.
Oh yes, please.
Well, I was just saying that in our understanding, the word has been used quite a lot in various conversations in the last decade, I would say. So your first understanding that, you know, we talk about Kathmandu being centralized in the country. So it's very much clear to many of us. So I think maybe your understanding is coming from a more specific, I don't know, it's urban studies, disciplines, etc. But so yeah, I mean, I also assume, because it seems like all of us were on the same page.
That's great. No, I mean, I just thought the discussion here is about the city and not how the urban system of Nepal is built up. So if we talk about the city, then we talk about the valley. And obviously the valley has different centers within the valley, but it's not, yeah, so that's why I'm saying that's my understanding. But it's fine, maybe we're talking about, in this forum, we're talking about the urban system of Nepal as a whole. And then of course, yeah, Kathmandu is a center and it's a centralization process. It's growing at 5 to 6% per year. That's most well understood, but not if we talk about the valley. That's my point. Over.
Thank you for your statements. Maybe moving on to the infrastructure mindset as well, shedding some light into that as well. I see somebody who disagrees with the statement. Any thoughts on the disagreement here?
But Pavina, maybe you can explain, since you came with the statement, is it thought about centralization of Kathmandu within the system of Nepal, urban system of Nepal, or is it centralization, let's say, of Kathmandu metro city within the valley of Kathmandu? I mean, that's I think the whole core why I'm asking this question. But since you came up with the statement, maybe you can clarify. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much. So this statement was again derived from the initial interviews, and sort of centralization is a word, as Niranjan mentioned, is sort of what we use in conversations as well when we talk about the problems of the problems that are stated here, you know, strains in resources and strains in services that is happening in Kathmandu. So this conversation was supposed to be about Kathmandu city, but I guess it's sort of very difficult to talk about Kathmandu in isolation, because when we say Kathmandu, usually a picture of Kathmandu Valley, the Kathmandu metropolitan city, the metro that sort of takes in Lalitpur, Bhaktapur as well, comes in the bigger picture. So I think it's both, Jonas, also the political centralization within Kathmandu Valley itself, and also Kathmandu Valley as a whole. I don't know if I answered your question or if I created more confusion. And if anybody wants to input their thoughts into this, please feel free to do so.
Well, just to add, I think, again, I think what both Jonas and Prabina were mentioning, I think Kathmandu Valley as a city, capital city of the country, Nepal, historically having been very centralized and sort of sheltered from the rest of the country. So it's the urban-rural divide. So I assume that that's what we're talking about. So taking the valley and the city as a whole, the capital city, hence, like the discussions in the last few years, you know, the whole federal model was proposed to counter the centralization of Kathmandu as a political, cultural, economic, central city. So I think that's what we're going for. But I think if people have different understanding, it's worth discussing.
Yeah, I'd agree. And I would also be curious on the understandings of the participants we have here.
Yeah, if I may say something about, so I was one of the people who selected undecided for centralization, particularly because I think just focusing on Kathmandu itself, if we think of centralized areas in the traditional sense, where we have, let's say, a central like business district, industrial area, residential areas, all sort of delineated, we don't really have that in Kathmandu. It's more of a mixed use kind of space, which for me actually is kind of a more sort of vibrant and like engaging environment than to have completely segregated uses. I think this idea that having sort of everything you need within 15 to 20 minutes of your home is quite interesting to me. So in that sense, central, like Kathmandu isn't quite centralized as some other South Asian examples, maybe. So that's why I chose undecided.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to shed more light here, Adish? Also for my own clarity as well, what would centralization mean for you? If you had to point an example of a city like this is a centralized city, which city would you point out to?
Okay, I'll try my best. So I guess the examples I'm more used to and more familiar with are cities that have, let's say, central business districts where it's completely commercial, office space only. There isn't a mix of sort of residential areas or industrial, for that matter. And Kathmandu doesn't really have that. It's more as like if you can just see, people live on top of shops, people live next to office spaces. Sometimes there's like small cottage industries and small sort of workshops next to where people live. So it isn't quite the sort of purpose of each area isn't really zoned in a way where it's completely separate from anything else. So it kind of creates this sort of constant negotiation between different people because of what's happening around you. So in that sense, Kathmandu is not sort of centralized in the sort of typical aspect that I sort of think about. of course, it is in the context of the country, it's very centralized, but within itself, it's like it's kind of really, like Jonas said, it's very fragmented, and it's also very vibrant. I don't know, it's got like a sort of mix anywhere you are. So in that sense, it does create both a challenge because it's not centralized. You can't actually implement some policies for certain areas as a whole because of the mix that is there. But it also, I think, creates kind of like interesting sort of inadvertent zones of where like inadvertently it's created access to lots of things that you need on a daily basis. So you don't actually have to travel, let's say 2 hours to get to, an industrial area, or like 2 hours to go to like the central business district. It's kind of like everything is sort of really within reach. And I think that is something kind of like that happened a bit more organically with a lack of sort of like zoning in a sense. So yeah, that's just something I thought about.
So the fragmentation that you just described within Kathmandu and the very mixed hues that we have in here would, again, I know this will be difficult to answer, but do you see this more as something positive for Kathmandu? That's something we should strive for, or do you mention you see challenges within this, but do you think there's like a way to strike balance?
I mean, I think there's two answers to that question. Of course, it doesn't make sense to have, let's say, heavy industry in the middle of your city where there's residences and where people, sleep and go to work and go shopping and things like that. So there are certain aspects of the city that do need to have their own designated spaces. But in the other sense, I think we see this a lot with European cities, for example, where there's they're pursuing more of these sort of 15, 20-minute cities, 15, 20-minute neighborhoods where people can live in an area and everything they need to access is within 15, 20 minutes of where they live. So there are schools, hospitals, shopping, anything. So it creates this sort of like micro mobility space. And I think Kathmandu actually has sort of elements of that. And I think it's been sort of inadvertent how it kind of came about, right? It's quite common for people to live on top of commercial spaces here, to have a mix of residence and office space in the same buildings. I mean, there is a severe lack of public space, so that would definitely, that's a definite drawback of what's happened. But I would say it's more of like a benefit to the way this sort of mixed use has been going on. But yeah, I'd be curious to hear what other people think as well.
I'll be also curious to hear from Ranjuji here. She, representing a political party and governance side of things, would be also curious to what she thinks about this. Ranjuji, are you there?
Yes, Pravinaji. So first of all, I think there has been quite a discussion on the word centralization, and the definition of centralization when we talk about cities or urban planning may be different when different with the definition when we talk about power sharing and authorities and division of works and etc. So I think we should be more clear about what we're talking about here, because I think we're more over talking about cities. So the definition should be related to the cities. And next thing I want to stress here is about the infrastructure of Kathmandu. I also quite disagree to what it's been mentioned there, because we don't quite have even the basic infrastructure right now. So to think ahead the mindset of people, I mean experts thinking infrastructure building is a definition of development is not correct. I don't think it's quite suitable with the case of Kathmandu because we are in dire need of at least basic infrastructures, uh, be it sewage facilities or proper sites of dumping or any other thing. We do not have it. So I think there needs to be a threshold or a benchmark which we need to set for what basic infrastructure a city must have to call it a proper city. So all of the things we're talking right now here is I think it's more of a thing that we read in the textbooks, ideal things, but in the reality, we lack almost every basic thing that a city must have. I think these are my only points. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So in terms of infrastructure mindset, correct me if I'm wrong, you think that uh, we haven't been able to go beyond the basic needs of the cities, and we are at the stage where we are looking at fulfilling the basic needs,
Yes.
and that needs to be covered first.
Yes. I think only after we fulfill the basic needs, the basic infrastructure, we can talk about what else do we need or we do not need. First, it's important to fulfill at least the basic things that a human requires to survive, and that is not available in Kathmandu, to be brutally honest.
Sure. Thank you. Would love to hear from anyone else on the infrastructure mindset statement, as well as also on what Ranjuji just mentioned. Um, if I can, pointing out to Bisham here, if you have any insights on this.
Thanks, Pravina. I think I echo a lot of things in terms of infrastructure, what Ranjuji said earlier as well. But it really depends, because the statement has said bigger infrastructure, right? So what does that bigger infrastructure means? Like, how much big is it for Kathmandu? It really depends. So that's why I put agree stamp on it, because not every big infrastructure is a development, right? So development and infrastructure which suffices the basic needs, or like the needs of threshold that we talked about as well, would be considered as a development. But then how do we, what's the nomenclature of the bigger development, the bigger infrastructure? I think we need to like dig down on that. And what I sense by the question is that we're thinking that bigger infrastructures are those which are more than needed, right? So henceforth, I just put agreed stamp over.
Okay. Thank you. So just a comment here. Bigger infrastructure or the concept of development for us has always sort of been borrowed from other countries, and we have been hearing this this term of making Kathmandu another Singapore, or like campaigns, and don't know, maybe with this there was to focus looking inwards first, looking what Kathmandu is, what Kathmandu has to offer, and then building on that as development infrastructure, rather than borrowing from solutions from other countries where the solutions work for them, but might not be feasible for Kathmandu. Any thoughts from anyone else here?
Can I go?
Sure.
I think to say we'll make Kathmandu as Singapore is a very idealistic thought, but it's way beyond our league for right now, because we've already talked that we do not even have basic facilities. And look at Singapore. I don't think they have something they do not have. Coming back to Kathmandu, we are the cultural city. We have temples and everything. We have all the traditionalities. So Kathmandu can be the city of all the tranquility, peace, and everything with the basic infrastructures. I stress again, when I say basic infrastructures, I go back to the most basic things, starting from running water to proper sewage drainage system, and at least beach roads with green belts of trees, uh, and proper green spaces for kids, for everyone. Those would be the basic things. And I think regarding the transportation as well, we should have some good discussions about how big transportation or mass transportation, which kind of mass transportation do we need? Can we be a metro, or we have some kind of uh, big buses, eliminating the tempos, which are said to be the environment friendly thing. Regarding that, also I agree to, I think Adish, she mentioned it earlier about the centralization and mobility, that Kathmandu should be a city from where every other zones can be reached in within half an hour, or within some minutes, or walk distance. Maybe if we could be able to make that, we can say we are sister of Singapore, but not like Singapore. Thank you.
Thank you.
Over to you, Tansi.
Oh my God, how come I'm in the spot? So I think, yeah, I mean, we had a much larger discussion around mobility rather than land and space, which is why I think, successive workshops are quite key, because, there is a lot to unpack. I think one of the key things that came up is, there is a lot going on in the city that we don't know about, the informal, the unrecognized, the unmapped, and also how to include this real city, in that sense of from the classes that we're not part of. We're, let's say, by and large, educated, middle class, upper middle, and we're really not including in our discussions how to be inclusive in the process itself for, let's say, Utopia as it refines its entry points into these cities. And then there were, so these are the refined, recognizing the informal sectors which are already in the city. If you go back, Dory, to that down. Yeah, in the refined problem statements. Yeah, I mean, this idea of recognition, of inclusive dialogue with all, however, is, how to make it possible. We don't know how to take a Zoom to the slum and do it. You have to find that out. And then there is a broad statement about, kind of like broad problem about mobility and its nexus with safety and perceptions of safety. And also identifying the potentials of the city and how to really unlock that. If I see that. And then, of course, the idea that a lot of the things that we keep talking about, they need to be sorted at a planning level, because we see that there is a problem of lack of planning regulations. There is a problem of lack of synergy between the government, what they plan, and what goes on. So how to really innovate in that planning stage as well. I didn't practice, I'm doing a bad job, so I'll stop now.
No, that was fantastic, thank you.
Dori, can I just add one? It's the, so there are also a vested interest group whenever you have to do you want to do something with the city, there are always oppositions, and there, like we talked about, a group of people whose interest in the bus or on the road, and they always oppose any other alternative means of transport or any other issues that you try to. So that's a challenge we have to face.
Thank you so much for sharing. If I can request Manila to go next, share the top twos if you were able to do that, and also Kavya to share the screen for Manila mirror board.
And I think Joey will be sharing from our side.
Yeah, okay. Hi, Sam. Okay. Yeah. I hope I don't get emotional here. No, but okay. So basically, we talked about, of course, mobility. And I think a big chunk of us agreed on the actual problem. But we thought maybe we'd go back to our history, our colonial history, which has affected also how the city is planned and how we also don't make use of the existing infrastructure, like our sidewalks are not used properly. They're not really for people, and basically they're used for other things. And they're all not always present. Also, there are some areas where there are no sidewalks at all, and so it's a city that's made for cars. And Trixie, one of us, also said that it has been always about the mindsets of people, and that for this, it's very important to note that in the same light, there's also more activism in the recent past, and so this topic is more talked about. And then we also felt that who can actually make the change in society regarding this has a lot to do with people who are in politics and in economics. And so there are strong voices that we hear because we make use of the social networking. But then there's a need for people to get more involved, and it's something that Filipinos in general are learning just now with regard to spearheading change. And then so more or less the thing about mobility is set. But for climate change, there were some particular points in which we disagreed on. While it's true that for all of us, the flooding is a problem, in the statement, it was stated that it was climate change that is making Manila more vulnerable. Instead, it's such an intricate problem that we've seen that it's not always about the climate change being the problem, but also, how Manila is. And so there's a suggestion for a reframing. No? So it's important that we take off from the original statement. It says that climate change is making Manila's communities more vulnerable during the rainy season, where communities are submerged in water, and that there's a lack of infrastructure for flooding. Instead, we saw that that's a problem, yes, but that's the main problem. And so the suggested reframe of the problem is that it's climate change that exacerbates the actual problem of flood, and the development policies which are already in place relating to negative impact on logistic systems have to be okay. It's important also that we note food systems, urban services and logistics, and the longevity of Metro Manila itself. It's something that has to be it's not given attention to. So there are already things that are in place, but maybe the enforcement that is not being attended to. Very important also between both topics that in the Philippines we all work in silos, and so getting our acts together would be a big help in solving all these problems that are societal and truly wicked. Did I say it all? There. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. And for now, moving on to Kathmandu, if I can request Adish to share the discussions. We were not able to vote as well. We didn't have the time for that, but to share the discussions. Over to Adish.
Okay. Yes, we weren't able to vote yet, but so I'll try my best to summarize some of the key points that came out. So the leading problem statement that our group dealt with was centralization of Kathmandu is both an advantage as well as a challenge. And we focused a lot on the definition of the word centralization because it meant different things for our participants. So it actually sort of highlighted a really interesting discussion around the word centralization. What does it mean? Are we talking about centralization in the context of our country or within the city itself? So we kind of explored both. And some of the things that we explored in terms of centralization in terms of the city was the lack of, let's say, central business districts or designated spaces for certain usage like industry and so on and so forth. So how that kind of could create a problem. One of our participants raised this issue of fragmentation, which is actually one of the leading issues for our city. So that was mostly what we focused in terms of our issues with centralization. Then I'm sort of doing a really short synopsis, but so in the next issue, we were talking about the infrastructure mindset and this sort of idea of chasing bigger infrastructure as better. But I think the general group's thought process was that it's not always clear that bigger infrastructure is going to be better. So it's going to be disproportionate in terms of its impact on people. It's not always going to have everyone's opinions and voices heard. So there was a lot of questions around. There were a lot of questions around whether bigger infrastructure is actually always better for the city. So those are just two very basic sort of summaries of our talking points.
Thank you so much for sharing. It seems like we had very lively discussions going on in all of the three cities. And it feels like all of us were pulled back in the middle of something, in the middle of discussions. So we sincerely hope that we will have these conversations going even after this workshop as well. And there will be chances for more interactions. So moving on to breakout room 2. In this breakout room, we will have an opportunity to interact with participants from other cities. So this would be more of a 3 cities breakout rooms. We will have smaller groups and we hope to discuss the urban visioning in these breakout rooms. So what we ask the participants is to create a preferred picture for their city for the year 2050. So how you envisioned your city in the 2050, what would be the ideal future, ideal scenario that you see for your city in the year 2050? Also to mention a few guiding questions here might be, what do you hear? What do you see? And how does it feel to be living in Manila, Dhaka, or Kathmandu, where this is your preferred future in the year 2050? Hope this is going to be a good discussion as well. Then moving on for a quick breakout room. Yeah, so talking about the preferred future for the year 2050, how would you envision Dhaka?
That's very interesting. I think first of all, even when we talk with our colleagues and everyone, we always talk about that maybe 10 or 20 years down the line, Dhaka would be a very interesting place to live in, right? Particularly in the space of using public transport. And if you know already, the construction of the metro rail is currently It's a huge project, huge government project. Some other donor partners are also involved. So if those things are getting done in due time, it would be a really interesting thing to live in. So that's number one, the public transport. The second thing would be to ease off owning a property, let it be land or apartment, especially for the millennials or young professionals. It would be easy to just come to Dhaka, get an apartment, get a place of yours, and really enjoy that. So I think that ease of owning property would really make easy for everyone, let it be doing business or let it be improving the economic condition, right? So that's number two. Number two would be a lot of walking space for women, children, and disabled people. Because at this moment, just the so we call it the tri-state area, right? Gulshan, Bonani, Baridhara. These are some of the places people can walk to a certain extent, not completely even. So yes, again, that walkability would be there in the cities, in the major cities, and also separate lanes for cycles, cars, buses. Bus accidents are being a huge problem in the city in the last couple of years. So government is trying to work on that, but it's still very much centered towards the major locations of the city. So that needs to be worked on. And overall, that freedom of mobility, that freedom of space, the sense of space, I think it makes a very, very interesting place for all of us to live in. These are some of my 2 cents. I'm not an architect, but as someone who is living in the city, I have been in, I think, 3-4 major cities in Bangladesh as of yet. So, and in some other parts of the world too. So yeah, these are some of the basic things that we would love to see. It's a gradual process, right? We can't just expect things to be drastically improved even in 2050. So we need to be patient, but we're probably will be doing that.
Yeah, I agree. And it seems like also from the initial user interviews that mobility is a big concern in Dhaka.
Yes.
Yeah. So and anything you think sort of starts to happen now to achieve that future that you just described in that many years?
It's actually happening, as I already mentioned. Metro rail construction is happening. Some of the global companies, let it be Uber, and locally also some startups are taking that charge, right? Pata completely developed something hyper local, and it's working fantastic. I think similar kind of innovation in the space of transport and mobility, we are yet to see those. I mean, you need hyper local solutions for local problems. Right?
Yes.
So this kind of initiatives, people are taking charge of it, and also the transportation authorities and even BRTA, the major authority who deals with transportation, mobility, they're also trying to implement system in place so that the process is at least somewhat structured, right? The people who are the major workforce, let it be the drivers, or the professionals who are working in the mobility sector, they're somewhat trained and educated, and they have some understanding of the standard, right? What it should look like to begin with. So I think I always emphasize on the education side of it. Things are happening, but we still need to do a really great job to begin with. Even in our team breakout room, we are also discussing about that, right? There's still so many nuances. It's still very much informal. Very much muscle power centric, this workforce. A lot of micromanagement need to be there, but we collectively need to do a really great job there to educating the workforce. These are some of the baby steps we can take from.
Yeah, and I guess density here is both a boon and a bane as well. Yeah. Don't know if we have much time left. I think it's almost time to leave the breakout room. Again, thank you so much for your insights, and thank you so much for participating.
Thank you, thank you. Thanks to you for organizing such a wonderful session. I learned a lot actually, all these architects and people who are actually working in this space. A lot to learn.
Okay, thank you so much. I think I'll be leaving this breakout room and seeing you in the plenary. See you.
These problems are and how similar they can be at times. It's quite eye-revealing, but you don't really know about these things unless you discuss. So I really appreciate that to begin with.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I actually got a bit late to join the workshop, but I was listening to the conversation in the Dhaka breakout room quite at the end, last 15-20 minutes, and I felt like some really much needed issues actually came up. And it actually got something in my mind too, that corruption has been actually a very integral part of our livelihood, be it related to the security or the land issues or how the informal settlements have sprung out. So perhaps in 2050, what I would vision as an individual and part of like all the other Bangladeshis perhaps, that when having city planning, town planning, relevant stakeholders such as architects should have a stand on that place in that table. And at the same time, when we're doing that, we should be quite sensitive about the migrants that actually come to Dhaka. These informal people are not thought of when there is anything planned, housing per se, because when like there are slums or slum-like area in other places, for example, in Mexico or Brazil, but there is a system in that too, you know, you say about sanitation system, waste management, simply like getting electricity in that particular area. If I specifically talk about Corel, and all of these are possible because there are innovations within that area, you know, those people are doing for their cultivation or any other like agricultural purposes. So those could be even much more well knitted. So giving them that space, that respect, or that position as a civilian, or as like not thinking of them as underprivileged, or just perhaps thinking it from that other side that okay, they need that right as well. So maybe by 2050, if I actually just say one liner and end this, when starting Bhorsha, I actually thought about having made sure that all women have a respectful space in wherever they're working, even as a maid or even as a corporate lady, having the proper gender pay or whatsoever, you know, not having. That's the vision I have, and it's quite optimistic, I believe, but let's see where this goes. So yeah.
That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing, Tareem.
Yeah, I think Tareem kind of pointed out one of the things that when we often talk about these informal people or the marginalized groups as experts or the privileged in the society, we often undermine the potentials they have. Sometimes we talk about how can innovation or technology go into slums. We don't have any idea of how advanced they are unless we actually go and see what they're into. So I think that's the first step. We are undermining them even before taking an initiative. And I think that's where we as experts are wrong. And we shouldn't undermine, rather see and try to cultivate those potentials despite the backgrounds or the marginalized communities or the vulnerabilities. I think at least giving the people or accepting that they even have the potential should be the first step, rather than making big initiatives as such. And I think that's the least we as experts should do and should promote ourselves. So
and if
yeah, that's what at least I see myself as a role in the 2050.
Yeah, but how do you think then it would look like? How would it feel? What would you see if we really just cultivated the innate potential? Obviously, we don't know what will come out of it, but in terms of how the marginalized people would navigate around the city, around their spaces, what do you think it might look like in 2050 if we were to give them the driver's seat, really?
I think they already have a driving force. I think we're just undermining the capability of it. and not taking our potential out of it, because they are getting things done their way. There's no stopping them. I just feel there's no stopping them. They're going to go to their workplace, get their things done, because their life depends on it. We just need to harness the potential and integrate it with the rest of the city, and not just push it aside and think that, okay, they're there.
Yeah. Any last thoughts?
I'm so glad this happened.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I'm really glad this happened. Yeah, the discussions are always quite nice. Yeah.
Tarim, any responses to what Arpa has said, or anything else you wanted to add on what you might see or feel or hear in 2050?
I think she went back to the main room.
She already went back. Okay. Super helpful.
All right.
Great to hear from you. I think this is really fantastic. I think this really highlights the need to, create a platform where people can, it's really inclusive and welcoming. And how do we, get that microphone in front of people who actually have the majority view, and we harness the potential of the experts, as you mentioned, but need to keep the voice front and center and clear is from the majority. Yeah.
So this would be the closing of this workshop. We would like to extend our gratitude for everyone who took out their precious time and was able to come here. I hope that there was something fruitful for you all in this workshop here as well. So closing by saying that, as mentioned earlier, this is the first event in the series of Asia workshops that Utopia will be conducting. And as we have seen in the breakout rooms earlier, that there was a lot of lively discussions happening, and we would like that to continue as well. And more intersections between the cities and the disciplines, sort of to help surface opportunities to nudge our cities in a direction that leads us to a better future. Yeah, and that's it for today. Please do stay back if there's another if you're up for another interesting interactive session. Thank you again for joining, and please do keep safe and stay safe. Thank you so much.